There is a sound you probably cannot name, but the second you hear it, something in the back of your brain lights up. A high, frantic mechanical wail, old city buses pulling away from a curb, semi-trucks grinding up a grade at night, an engine that sounded like it was revving twice as fast as it actually was. For about 50 years, that scream was the sound of America doing its heavy lifting. And then, sometime in the 1990s, it just stopped. The company that built it, Detroit Diesel, was once the greatest engine empire this country ever produced. And the company that destroyed it was the same one that created it, General Motors. The obvious answer is emissions, tougher rules killing the dirty old engine. But that is not really what happened. The real story starts with a single decision General Motors made in 1938, a decision that made them a fortune for half a century, and then quietly became a trap they could not climb out of. And here's the part almost nobody knows. The empire did not actually die. It scattered. Right now, pieces of it are bolted onto muscle cars, humming inside fishing boats, and pulling a trailer down a highway near you, including something you have absolutely seen sticking out of a car hood and never knew the name of. There are about 5 layers to this. Most people never get past the first. So let us start with what that scream actually was. To understand why it mattered, go back inside General Motors in the 1930s. Research Chief Charles Kettering wanted a diesel that was light, fast, and compact. Nothing like the slow, industrial boat anchors everyone else built. His team cracked it. In January 1938, General Motors spun up an entire new division in Detroit just to make it. They called it the Series 71, and the most famous version, the 671, packed serious power into a block small enough to drop almost anywhere. People nicknamed it the Jimmy, after General Motors, and because of how it ran, it screamed. That sound was about to go everywhere. By 1939, it powered city buses, then GMC trucks, and for nearly 2 decades, GM kept these engines exclusive to its own trucks and coaches, a weapon no competitor could touch. But the engine's real proving ground was World War II. When America entered World War II with no purpose-built tank engine ready, GM did something almost comical. It bolted 2 671s together, called it 6046, and dropped it into the M4 Sherman. That twin diesel Sherman went to the Marines in the Pacific, and, through Lend-Lease, to the Soviets and the British. By the time the war ended, more than 20,000 military vehicles and around 45,000 landing craft were running on these engines. This was no minor parts supplier. By the end of 1943 alone, Detroit Diesel had over 4,000 workers building close to 60,000 engines a year. And when the war ended, the scream didn't fade, it spread. Into fishing boats and tugboats, into the generators that powered job sites and backup systems, into more buses, more trucks, more of everything that moved a recovering nation. For half a century, if something big and American needed to do hard work, the odds were uncomfortably good. A Detroit Diesel 2-stroke was screaming inside it. That's the empire. But the exact feature that made this engine unstoppable was the same one that was quietly going to kill the entire company. And almost nobody saw it coming. Here's why it screamed and why the scream was a warning. The 4-stroke in your car fires once every 2 turns of the crankshaft. A 2-stroke fires every single turn, twice as often. That's why a Detroit Diesel always sounded like it was spinning twice as fast as it really was. That frantic wail wasn't drama, it was arithmetic. Firing twice as often meant roughly double the power strokes, which meant real muscle from a light, compact, almost brutally simple engine. That's the genius. That's how one design could win a war and haul a country for 50 years. But a 2-stroke can't breathe on its own. With no separate intake stroke, General Motors had to mount a device on the side of every engine, a roots blower, an air pump that force feeds air into the cylinders and shoves the exhaust out through ports in the cylinder walls. That blower whine, layered over the double-time exhaust, is the other half of the scream. Brilliant for 1938. But notice what's happening. The engine only runs because it is constantly force-fed air and constantly burning a little oil, along with its fuel to stay sealed. And that's the catch no engineer could design away. A Detroit two-stroke could burn a gallon of oil every 1,000 miles, and that oil went straight out the stack as thick black smoke, along with unburnt fuel from the scavenging process. The thing that made it powerful made it dirty, permanently. The smoke wasn't a malfunction. It was the design doing exactly what it was built to do. Now hold on to that blower, because it pays off in a way you won't expect. Years later, hot rodders would tear that exact air pump off junked diesels, flip it around to blow instead of suck, and bolt it onto gasoline engines. That supercharger you've seen jutting out of a muscle car's hood, the one screaming on a top fuel dragster, is this, but we'll get to where it lands. For now, sit with the trap General Motors had built for itself. In 1938, an engine that made big power and a little smoke was a miracle. By the 1970s, that same smoke was about to become illegal, and General Motors' response is the part that actually destroyed the empire. By the 1970s, the world turned on the two-stroke from 3 directions at once. The 1973 oil crisis made fuel expensive overnight, and a thirsty engine became a liability. New EPA rules tightened around exactly the smoke these engines produced. Noise regulation crept in, and few things on a highway were louder than a screaming Jimmy. Meanwhile, Cummins and Caterpillar were perfecting cleaner, thriftier 4-strokes and eating General Motors customers alive. The path forward was obvious to everyone. Build a modern 4-stroke fast. So what did General Motors do? It doubled down on the 2-stroke. In 1974, it launched the Series 92, a bigger 2-stroke that drank even more fuel. The company kept selling the past while the future drove off with its customers. The product slipped too. One executive later admitted the division had been letting bad product out the door and losing good customers for it. But the most telling number is this. Across the 1980s, General Motors spent something like $50 billion modernizing its factories. Of that, its struggling diesel division got around $100 million. Rounding error. It was the clearest signal the corporation had quietly given up on the engine that helped build it. General Motors did eventually build the right engine, and in 1987, it introduced the Series 60, a 4-stroke inline-6, and the first heavy-duty truck diesel in the world with fully integrated electronic controls. The 12.7-liter version, made up to 500 horsepower, ran far cleaner, and sipped fuel next to the old Screamers. By every account, it was superb, and it arrived years too late, into a company already hemorrhaging cash. Therefore, General Motors made the decision that defines this story. Instead of finishing the rescue, in January 1988, it handed the empire to an outsider, racing legend Roger Penske, who took a controlling 60% of the new Detroit Diesel Corporation for roughly $50 million, partly financed by a loan from General Motors' own bank. The company that invented the engine sold control of it for the price of a few nice houses. And here's the irony underneath it all. The 2-stroke had made General Motors a fortune for 50 years, and that fortune was the exact reason General Motors couldn't walk away in time. The success was the trap. But what happened the moment General Motors let go should change how you hear that scream. Because the second General Motors walked away, the company took off. When Penske took over, Detroit Diesel had lost around $600 million over 5 years and held a humiliating 3.5% of its own market. It was dying. Within 2 years, Penske doubled its share. By 1993, it hit about 26%, most of it torn straight out of Cummins. By the late 1990s, it was pushing past 30%. The Series 60, the engine General Motors gave up on, became one of the best-selling heavy truck diesels in America. In 2000, Daimler Chrysler bought the whole company, and the name lived on as simply Detroit. And now we reach the part you've been living inside your whole life. Remember that blower, the air pump off the side of the diesel? That supercharger jutting out of every blown muscle car hood? The one whining on a 300-mile-an-hour top fuel dragster? the one you've seen in 100 movies and never knew what to call. That is the 671. Drag racing still names its superchargers after these diesels: 671, 871, all the way up to 1471. The scream you thought vanished has been hiding on drag strips this whole time. But it's not just there. Those old 671 engines are still thumping inside fishing boats and tugboats. The backup generator that kept a hospital running through the last blackout has a real chance of being one. The classic city bus your parents rode pulled away on exactly that sound. And the modern engine wearing the Detroit name today, the DD-15, is very likely bolted inside the Freightliner that dropped a package on your porch this week. You've been surrounded by this empire your entire life, so here's where you actually land. You started this thinking about a sound that disappeared, and maybe an old engine that lost to cleaner technology. But that's not what happened. GM didn't destroy Detroit diesel with one bad decision. It built a brilliant engine with a fatal flaw baked in from 1938, grew rich and comfortable on that flaw, watched the world demand something cleaner, doubled down on the wrong bet, fixed it one model too late, and sold off the dying company for pocket change, right before an outsider brought it roaring back. That scream was never just noise. It was the engine that won a war, moved a nation, and quietly made its own creator too complacent to keep it. And the reason you don't hear it on the interstate anymore isn't that it lost. It's that it got too dirty to survive out loud, so it changed its name and scattered into the boats, the generators, the dragsters, and the trucks all around you. You're not remembering a dead engine. You're remembering an empire GM nearly killed, gave away, and accidentally made immortal. And if it seems strange that GM let go of the company whose diesels won World War II, wait until you hear what GM did with the division that invented the modern diesel locomotive, the one hauling freight across this country tonight.